Okay.
Your life.
Live. Thank you, Suraj. All right. And we have got Ryan Levesque on our Genius Entrepreneur Mastermind call this week. Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Roger. How's it going?
Very good. Great to have you here. And just before we jump into the whole conversation with Ryan, let me just give a few openings for everybody, especially those who might have just joined us recently. Two things. First of all, we actually, for some reason, had a link that went out to this Zoom link, which is why we have a few of you actually joining the Zoom call live here. And if you are here, I want to kind of like redirect you to where we are all meant to be. So here is my screen where I'm just going to share with you a couple of things. First of all, if you have not recently been looking at the latest things that have been happening on Genius U, we have our entirely new webpage here, which was actually designed by one of our Crystal Circle members and Gem members, whose name is Dimitri, and he runs a company called InfoX. So he put all of this good stuff together, so you can kind of go and have a look at all of this. And if you're looking for all the latest things, like all the latest events or mentors, which you are all on, then they are all in here as well. So you can kind of see them all and book directly from here as well, all around the world, all the things going on. And then the second thing is, where are we right now? We are here on the Mentor Circle. So there's a link in all of the posts to the Entrepreneur Mentor Circle here. So for everyone who is now listening, I'm going to refresh this because we are now rolling live on here, and we're going to actually be posting all of our comments on here. And if you do have any questions you want to ask as we jump into this session, then you can do that as well. You can see here that the live stream is now posted and it's rolling. Just push play and you're going. Click here where in the world you are, right? And just see where it is right now. And also, if you are not on this page and you happen to be on Facebook, same thing on the Entrepreneur Mastermind group here. You can be having a look down here and see that basically the post is here. And the link is all being updated as we speak, because this is where we actually put the Zoom link instead of the Circle link, right? So I think Marie is actually changing that as we speak right now. Okay, so let's get to Ryan. So this basically is Ryan's site. I'm going to post Ryan's site here as well, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about how Ryan's whole focus has been for a period of time now. Like, really, how do you actually go high tech, high touch? Like, this is one of the big things we're talking about Entrepreneur 5.0. How do you actually personalize everything you're doing through assessments, which obviously you all know about because that's what we do. And he has a great system which actually allows you to figure out exactly how to do this, starting with the ASK method, which is now kind of growing more and more into a number of other areas as well. So without further introduction than that, I am actually going to jump right over to you, Ryan. And before we get right into what you're doing, let's talk first of all about when we first connected. When was the first time you came across Wealth Dynamics, and how did that kind of like evolve into the other things you're doing as well?
Yeah, well, first of all, Roger, it's awesome to be here, and everyone watching this, it's great to be with you. I'm really excited to have our time together right now. What's interesting is you and I have, I think, known each other for quite some time, but just recently had an opportunity to spend some time together in America at a private dinner with us and I think about maybe 10 or so people. And we were sat next to one another and just had an opportunity to chat finally and talk about what we're all doing. And that's kind of what led to doing this call right here. But the story goes much further back than that. That was just recently, earlier this year. But I was introduced to Wealth Dynamics through a friend of mine. And I don't remember the exact year. I'm sure have it in your database when I purchased my Wealth Dynamics test. But it was, gosh, going back maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago, maybe as far as 10 years ago. And it was when I first kind of got into this world of building an online business. After I graduated from university, I worked in a corporate job that took me to China. And I spent about 5 years working in Asia. We were just talking before we went on live. I spent a lot of time traveling all across China, all across Southeast Asia, across India, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. I was all over Asia. And I was sort of burnt out from all that travel. And I had some friends of mine who had built these quote unquote internet businesses that allowed them to live anywhere in the world, work where they want. Like right now, I'm at home, not having to travel. And I was very attracted to that. So eventually my wife and I started our first business. We moved back to America. And when we moved back to America, I didn't know anybody. And I was introduced to a mutual acquaintance of ours. His name is David Gonzalez. And he was one of the first people I met in what's now my home city of Austin, Texas. And in one of the first few times we had gotten to know each other, I was, telling him I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. I'm still trying to figure out what type of business I really want to build. And he said, you know what, you've got to take this test. It's this great test that'll give you insight into who you are. And like so many of us here on this call, like I couldn't resist the promise of self-discovery, to learn something more about myself. And so I remember where I was sitting. I remember I was in my car. I remember I had a call with David. I remember I had a little notebook and I wrote down the URL, which I don't know if it's still your URL, but it was, I think, wdprofile.net or .com. Yeah. And it's funny that I even remember that URL. I remember writing it down by hand. I remember what the notebook looked like, and I wrote it down. I closed it, put it in my pocket, drove home, and then later that night, when I was at my computer, I went and purchased a test, and I took it, and it was incredibly insightful. I learned so much about myself, and it was one of the first few quizzes or assessments that I took that set me on this path to really make this the thing that I've invested my 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 hours in over the last decade, which has been building assessments in market after market designed to generate leads, to learn about those leads, and transform those leads into customers. And I've done it to the tune of well over 5 million people have taken the quizzes that I've built. We've generated well over $100 million in top line gross revenue through those quizzes and assessments. I've personally done it in over 23 different markets. I've had 2 companies that I've developed partnerships with that have had 9-figure exits on the back of those assessments, meaning they've sold for over $100 million. And at my peak, I was generating 52,000 email subscribers per day, daily, across all of the quizzes that I built in all these different markets. About half a decade ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to make a shift, and I began teaching this methodology. I was a practitioner, and I'd done it in all these different markets, and I began teaching this methodology. I was encouraged to write a book. I published a book. It's called Ask. It went on to sell hundreds of thousands of copies worldwide. It was Inc. magazine's #1 marketing book of the year. It's gone on to be published in all these different languages. It eventually led me to publish another book just this year called Choose, which I do happen to have a copy of here, which is the predecessor, the prequel to Ask. And in Ask, I revealed the methodology that I used to go into these 23 different markets. And in Choose, I revealed how we chose these 23 markets in the first place. And today we have programs that teach how to build these marketing quizzes and assessments using the methodology that we've developed over the last decade. We have a technology. We built a technology platform, a software platform to build these quizzes and assessments. And really, this has been the thing that I would, I'd say I've invested my 10,000 hours to be world-class in this very narrow, very specific methodology that's proven to be very effective in market after market. So that's the top line. That's a very high level, very, kind of top line, 30,000-foot view of the last 10 or so years that's gotten to where we are here today. And Wealth Dynamics has played a big role in that. And it's really cool how things have sort of come full circle, how, we're here on this conversation right now. And it's been one of several really great conversations you and I have had over the last year.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's really, really cool. And it's really great to see just everything that you've evolved and grown around one very specific area. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people. They just go too wide, too broad, trying to do too many things. And when you really just become world-class and #1 in one thing, just how much attraction you create as a result of it. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you've shared just in what you went through that we're going to cover in this call. And we're going to break this up a little bit into, first of all, just the whole process of assessments themselves and why they work and so on, right? And then we're going to go a bit more into your journey on, like, exactly as you said, it isn't just about you teaching this, you've actually practiced it as well, and you still do, and how you balance those things as we go forward as well. And on the first one, which is just there's no one who's part of our community that didn't come in through an assessment, right? So whether or not it was Wealth Dynamics or the corporate version Talent Dynamics, or now with like, purpose test, passion test, genius test, all these different tests, which are all things that are all about self-awareness. I talk, as you probably heard, around the three steps of the entrepreneur, which is self-awareness, and then self-mastery, and then self-expression, right? And how one leads to the other as you go through that as well. So there's the obvious thing for someone who is taking a test, like everyone who's been on here, which is like, oh, like getting some self-awareness is a good thing, which is why I'm doing this. But from the business case of actually doing assessments, if I just kind of share like a few key pointers of what we've seen on our side, and I'd love to get your insight on this. Number one, because everyone's got some kind of cost per acquisition of people coming through. Generally, when people are seeing something which is really valuable to themselves, they're much more likely to do it. And as a result, your cost of acquisition comes down. And they're also more likely to share with other people as well, right? So there's an element of basically the kind of like business case of just cheaper to find people or attract people who are the right people. And then the second thing, which is like so fundamental, is how much time we waste by not knowing our customer. So we can't actually target the right products in the right way to them as well. And the third thing is like when people think you know them better, because you do, they're going to stick around for longer, right? So there's the different benefits that we've seen. From your side, you've taken it to a different scale. So what would you add to that? And what would you say are the biggest areas that you've seen have been the reason this just works well from a commercial point of view?
Yeah, you touched on a lot of them, using it. I love listening to you because you and I use slightly different language to describe a lot of the same concepts, and it's cool to see independently that you've arrived at a lot of the same benefits that I've discovered, frankly, over the last decade or so. So the first psychological trigger, as I describe it, is the power of self-discovery. It does not matter what market you are in. It doesn't matter if you're in the golf market, the business funding market, the weight loss market. It doesn't matter if you're a therapist, if you're an insurance agent, if you're a real estate agent. It does not matter what market you're in, what business you're in. The power of self-discovery, the promise to offer someone the opportunity to learn something about themselves is universal. It does not matter what market you're in. Everybody's favorite subject is the same: me, myself, and I. Tell me more about me. That's what everyone is walking around thinking. Tell me more about me. And when you offer someone that promise, it's incredibly irresistible. So that's the first psychological trigger that makes quizzes and assessments so powerful. The second is something that we call the power of micro commitments. So whenever you ask someone to do anything on your website or through your funnel, you're asking them to take a step that the brain perceives as a threat. So the psychology around this is that whenever you ask someone to make any sort of change in their life, the brain wants to maintain homeostasis. The brain is saying that, nope, change is bad. Let's keep things the way they are, even if that change is good. And it's why we have friction whenever we want to do something in life, whether that's exercise, eat healthier, get on an airplane and travel to an event, whatever it is, our brain is saying, no, change bad, stay the same good. Our brain perceives it as a threat. So the way that you overcome that inertia that you face whenever someone is faced with the opportunity to click on your Facebook ad and do something on your website is to use a hack. And the hack, very simply, is to shrink the size of the step. If you shrink the size of the step that you're asking someone to take, you can actually fly below the radar and not trigger the fight or flight response on people's brains in their amygdala and the limbic system of their brain. And instead, it just is kind of like the frog in the boiling water. The frog doesn't even realize that you're raising the temperature if you raise it slowly over time. So that's what you're doing. And when you ask someone to give you their name and email and contact information right out of the gate, that's like turning up the heat too fast. But if instead you begin by saying, hey, thanks for stopping by. What I've learned is that when it comes to X, there's no one size fits all answer. But if you take a moment to tell me a little bit about your situation, I can point you to the best resource for you. Question number one, which of the following best describes you? Are you looking to start a new business or grow an existing business? Are you a therapist or are you a patient? Are you a right-handed tennis player or a left-handed tennis player? You start by asking a non-threatening or a series of non-threatening questions like this to grease the wheels and move people down your funnel. What you're doing is you're flying below the radar by taking advantage of the power of micro commitments. Now, the ancillary benefit to that, as you touched on, Roger, is that when you're asking these questions, number one, you now have data around this prospect, this prospective customer. And with that data, you can now better serve that individual and better sell to that individual.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, I know that your email address is roger23@gmail.com, for example, right? If that's the only data point that I have about you, like how well can I actually serve you? Like, can I point you to the best article on my blog? Can I direct you to the best podcast episode in my podcast? Can I direct you to the best product? Can I direct you to the best version of my sales page that has testimonials that line up with who you are? Probably not. But if I take the time to ask you a few strategically thought through questions in the form of an assessment, where the promise is, Roger, you're going to learn something about yourself. And in the process, I'm also going to learn something about you so I can better serve you. That's A, incredibly compelling, and B, allows you to better sell to that individual. I like to say, when you try to be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to nobody. And I know grammatically that's not correct, but it drives the point home. If you try to have, if right now you're listening to this and you have one version of your webinar, you have one version of your sales page, one version of your video sales letter, one version of your sales pitch, one version that everybody is going through, I'm telling you right here, right now, you are missing a massive opportunity. And if you're not segmenting people based on whatever framework you want to choose, their wealth dynamic type, their biggest challenge, whatever it is, we could talk about that in a moment. If you're not doing that, you are at risk of being left behind, because this is where the internet is moving. People are expecting a personalized or near personalized experience. The days of, at least in America, I can't speak for Singapore or Indonesia or South Africa, but in the United States, the days of walking through the spaghetti sauce aisle and having 2 options, Prego or Ragu, are over. You walk through that spaghetti sauce aisle, there are 100 options, every possible combination that you can imagine. And that's what people expect. When they come to your website, they expect to get exactly what they want and need. Now, it's not to say that this means you need to have 100 different products. One of the powers of the Ask method is using what we call the power of perceived customization. Mm-hmm. Now, perceived customization is, imagine having an assessment on your website that's designed to understand a little bit about that person so you can speak to them in a way that is tailored to their unique situation. Now, you might sell the same product to everybody, but knowing just a little bit about who they are allows you to speak to their unique situation. Perfect example. So we sell this book. This is a book. It's called Choose. In this book, we teach people how to make the single most important decision before you start your business, which in our world is not what are you going to sell, but who are you going to serve? Who's your market? What is your niche? That is the single most important decision, because if you get that wrong, it doesn't matter what you sell. You could sell gold-plated whatever, made of diamond. But if you haven't chosen the right market, you're not going to sell anything. So we start, surprisingly, with an assessment to help understand what type of business is right for you. Take this assessment to find out now. And we ask a series of questions to understand your personality type. Are you more introverted, more extroverted? To ask questions like, what would you like to spend your days doing? In a room by yourself writing, or on social media all day interacting with other people, or spending your time on the phone talking to potential clients, or being in front of a live audience? Like, what excites you? What lights you up? And with this combination of answers, we can diagnose your situation and prescribe the right type of business for you based on the little that we know about you. Yeah. And when we do that and have that information, we can talk about how this book can help you, not in a generic way, but in a way that speaks to your unique combination of traits and background and situation. And all of a sudden, this doesn't become a generic book recommendation. It becomes here's the reason why this book is right for you based on what I know, the little I know about what you've told me about your background. And whether you sell a book, whether you sell a course, whether you sell a backpack, whether you sell a high-end water filtration system, and I've done all these things, that's why I'm bringing this up, by putting an assessment on the front of your funnel before you begin trying to sell your product and service, A, yes, it drives your lead cost down because of the power of self-discovery and curiosity and all that stuff. And B, it allows you to drive up your conversion rate because you're now speaking to people knowing a little bit about them as opposed to guessing who they are and doing it in a one-size-fits-all way. So I know that was a long answer to a short question, but that kind of starts to scratch the surface of why this is so powerful and why it's so effective.
Breaking it down a little bit more even from what you were just sharing, because you gave some really good examples there as well of the different ways that you can actually be asking questions. What we've also noticed, and I found this really interesting looking at how a lot of the way you're doing the Ask method works, but I'd be interested in your take on the different types of assessments as well. So like the way, again, we would typify the different types is on the one hand, you would have something which is like a personality assessment. So like, I'll give you an example of each of the three of these. Like we're at the moment, we're launching our junior school programs, which are for parents with kids where they can go onto these like, high self-awareness programs where kids find out their passion, purpose, and those kind of things, right? So a personality assessment, it really is as simple as saying, like what's the perfect school for your child? Take the personality test to find out, right? So then they basically, and then on that one there, it is the kind of things like, are they more extrovert or introvert? Are they more like learning through visuals and so on? And so the parents really curious because they want to know what is the learning type of their child. They want to know like what is the right result as a result of that. And so there's a real desire to, like, as you say, tell me more about me. That's very different from a progress assessment. Where you're actually saying, how good a parent are you in supporting your child? Take the score and find out your score out of 100. And when you're going through that one, you're going through, are you putting your child in a place where they are super motivated in life, 0 to 10, what's your answer, right? Like, are they, and what that does is it actually allows you to share the benefits of your business and get them hungry to go, oh my gosh, I've got a low score because like, I don't know this stuff. And clearly this is going to actually give me the answers to this. And that's the second type. And we use that quite a lot in things like our Millionaire Master Plan test and so on. Like people go, oh my gosh, I'm at this level, I need to get the next level up. And then the third type, which we haven't actually done a lot of, but this is where you do really well, is the whole market segmentation type, right? Which is where, okay, so if you do want to help your child, then like, are you more, looking for something that does this or does this, or are you in this country, and are you have like this income or that income? And so those are the kind of things which I like to then really direct people in a different way. In your experience, which ones do you favor, or which ones do you see being more effective? Or is it even like, is there an order of when you put different ones in place as people are going through the customer journey?
It's a great question. So in our world, and what I'm giving you is the distillation. It is if you know how maple syrup is extracted, right? And I say maple syrup because I grew up in New England, and my family's from French Canada, and I have family members who harvest maple syrup from the maple trees in the Laurentian Mountains. When you harvest maple syrup, you're tapping hundreds, if not thousands, of maple trees, and you're taking the sap through a distillation process that refines it over time and eventually just leaves you with a tiny little bit of super sweet maple syrup. And you say, how could this come from the trees? Well, there's a process, there are many steps. And so what I'm about to share with you, and what I'll share this entire call, is the distillation of tapping thousands of maple trees to find out what is the true sweet, pure, grade AA maple syrup. And so there are literally hundreds of different possible quizzes and assessments to use from a marketing perspective. There are 3 that we found are the frameworks that represent the most powerful and most successful. And I'll share what those 3 are. Now, when we're talking about quizzes and assessments in this conversation, I'm not talking about quizzes and assessments from the perspective of testing the knowledge of your paid customers to see how well did they retain the information that you teach. I'm specifically talking about their effectiveness from the perspective of taking people from an advertisement, let's call it a Facebook ad, clicking on that ad, answering a series of questions, turning into a lead, and then transforming into a paid customer. That is the purpose specifically. So my quizzes and assessments are not paid products. So this isn't like the Wealth Dynamics test. When I took it, I paid, I don't remember what I paid. I think it was what, $49 or $69 or $99, whatever the price was. I don't recall. I paid an amount of money, and that effectively was the product.
Right.
What we're talking about here is a lead generating funnel that transforms clicks into customers. So 3.
The test is free, right? Like
yeah. Exactly. These are free. These are not paid. Yeah. So first type is what we call a type quiz. Type quiz is analogous to what you described as a personality quiz, but it extends beyond personality. It's not just necessarily limited to your personality type. It's your type, meaning that you fall into one of several situations. The purpose of this is to take people from a place in their mind where they feel like there are an unlimited number of possibilities. And you're then taking that confusion and then saying there are really 5 different options. So you think that there are a million possibilities. There are really 5 options. And if you answer a few questions, I can recommend which option is right for you. So perfect example, Amy Porterfield, she's a good friend of mine. She has a program right now that teaches you how to create an online course. We helped her build an assessment that is what type of course is right for you. There are only 5 of them. Take this assessment to figure out what type of online course is right for you and your business. Now, that's not a personality test per se, but it's taking people from this perception of there are a million possibilities when it comes to creating an online course. You're telling me there are only 5? Like I just told you a moment ago that there are only 3 types of quizzes, 3 frameworks, right? There are a million possibilities. No, there are only 3. And I'll help you decide which of these 3 is right for you. So that's a type-based quiz. Second type is what we call a killer quiz. A killer quiz taps into the power of identifying what type of mistake or mistakes people are making, identifying their number 1 mistake, and then telling them what they should do about it. Perfect example of this is in the golf market. Developed a quiz in the golf market, which we called the Swing Killer Quiz. And it goes like this. When it comes to swinging the golf club, from the seasoned tour pro to the ranked beginner, I've discovered that there are 10 big mistakes that people make. And when you identify your single biggest mistake that you're making right now when it comes to swinging the golf club, we can often unlock 25 to 30 additional yards of driving distance overnight. And the best part is I can identify what your number 1 swing killer is in under 60 seconds. All you need to do is click the button below, answer a few simple questions, and I'll see you on the other side. So what we're doing here, which is distinct and different from the type quiz, is we're identifying what type of mistake someone is making. And the reason why this is powerful is the fear of loss is infinitely more powerful than the promise of gain. Again, headline, for any parents who are watching this right now, imagine 2 headlines. Headline number 1, how to raise a well-adjusted, contributing member of society and what to do as a parent. Headline number 1. Headline number 2, the single biggest mistake parents make that screw their kids up for life. Click here to find out now. The fear of loss is infinitely more powerful than the promise of gain, right? We want to know what we're doing wrong. We don't want to screw things up. So you're tapping into that psychology with framework number 2, the killer quiz. Third type, one that you also touched on, Roger, and that's what we call the score-based quiz. Now, the score-based quiz appeals to a different type of psychology here. Score-based quiz is a way for you to identify where someone is, where they stack up against either where they should be or against their peers. So I'll give you an example of this. Worked on a quiz that we call the authority score. Do you know how your level of authority stacks up against your competition? Take this assessment now to find out how you stack up against your peers. Now, the reason why this is so powerful is we're constantly comparing ourselves, right? We're in comparison mode. Ever since we were young kids and we got those report cards, we were learned and conditioned that we're only as good as our latest grade, right? And when I'm doing live talks, I always love to see the audience raise their hand, and I say, raise your hand if you were, and this is the language you use in America, I'm not sure if this applies internationally, raise your hand if you were an A student growing up, right? If you got A's, and I'll get a segment of the audience raising their hands. I say, all right, raise your hand if you were a C student growing up. And then the C students are like the defiant rebels in the room. Usually if it's a group of entrepreneurs, they're raising their hand loud and proud, like, yeah, screw you. I was a C student. Look at me now, right? And it's just funny to see the different attitudes between the 2 groups. But I invite people to do that because the point is not whether you're an A student or a C student. The point is that we often carry these labels into adulthood.
Right.
And even as adults, even years away from school, we still identify with being an A student or a C student or whatever. These labels run deep. And so deep in our core, in our psychology, we want to know, how do we stack up? Right? So if you're measuring your digital readiness score, it's another quiz that developed. Digital marketing agency wanted to measure how your digital presence stacks up against the competition. Take this digital readiness quiz to find out your digital readiness score. Now, in the spectrum of easiest to implement through hardest to implement, killer is the easiest, type is in the middle, score is the most difficult.
Right.
And the reason why score is the most difficult is because score requires thinking through an algorithm around how you're going to score someone.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of dimensions. So for someone who's implementing things for the first time, I often say score is more of an advanced strategy. Kind of know that it's there and know that you could do it. Typically, you want to start with either killer or type.
Right.
Now, next question is, how do you know which one to start with? Well, we start with, what is the angle that the market is going to respond most favorably to? And the secret here, and we can talk about this in as much detail as you'd like, but the secret here is, before you build any quiz, any assessment, we test the topic and how the market responds to that topic before we build it.
Right.
So is it swing killer? Is it your swing score? Is it your swing type? Or is it something else? And we want to test which of those concepts does the market respond best to, knowing that we want people to click on our ads, click on our emails, click on our social media posts, click on our Instagram posts, whatever, before we actually build the thing. Because building the thing takes time and it takes work. So before we build the thing, we want to make sure that it's going to work. And so there's a process to doing that, to testing out these ideas, to brainstorming all the possibilities, shortlisting your top few, testing those top few against one another, seeing which of those get the highest click-through rates, the highest open rates, and then from there making a decision, which of these are we actually going to build?
Right.
So there's a process, and this provides some clues around how we figure out what our quiz is going to be in our market.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. And that whole process, that's like where if someone says, okay, I need that process, I got to go through that myself, which would be the best either book or resource that you have that those on this call can go check out?
Oh, gosh. Well, one of the things that I know that you and I we're working on something. We got something we're cooking up in the background, which is to teach people through this process. Historically, I've only taught this process through live workshops. Yeah. So we've done live workshops where we take people through the process. It's a 3-day process. There's a bit of homework that you do ahead of time. We go through this 3-day process, and it's something that we've historically done once or twice a year. And where we are right now, and the thing that you and I have been talking about, and really it's, if anyone's interested in this, like, please let us know, is taking people through this process digitally, without having to fly across the world, be in a room with me in Austin, Texas, and go through this process, but do it from the comfort of your home, going through the same process, and having the technology, the tool to actually set this up step by step. And so, one of the things that you and I have been talking about is putting something together. And I know, if there's enough interest in the community that, we'd be happy to do that. So.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
So for everyone listening, because like everyone who's a mentor on this program, you all know that we say you have to start with assessment, and if you're not going to start with one of our ones where you kind of right off the back of it, you have to create your own, because without that information, you're not using all the platform and everything in the most personalized way. Because until you know your customer, and they have that expectation, everyone who comes along has that expectation, is going to get personalized anyway. So that whole thing that Ryan's talking about is us as really taking all of Ryan's work, putting it into MicroDegree, giving you a chance to get started, and then get to that next level where you can actually kind of be using all these tools in the most effective way. So we've got all that coming. There's also a question that I have as we kind of roll into this expertise that you have, which is, I was looking at your Facebook page. I'm just going to share this for a second because this is really, really super cool as well. So as well as, oh, and by the way, really important for everyone, definitely subscribe up to all of the good stuff that Ryan actually shares, because you share a lot of really, really good tips and things within the things that you do as well. And I'm going to come to Bucket.io in a minute, so I think it's like super important. But on this page of yours, where you've just actually posted like in the last 24 hours, that you basically just hit like for the third time the Inc. 5000 list. And I actually saw down here, this was like a post which also showed up on my feed as well, which was when we actually were together. This was Sam who actually posted.
That's it.
Which was also really cool. So here's a question for you, which is one of the things, which is all about like how you're growing the business. One of the things which has been a big part of the whole Entrepreneur 5.0 theme, this whole shift of like information age, where it was all about just digital, and then you're either an online and offline business, high tech or high touch, and then now this whole 5.0 like place we're going to, where it's all combined up together. Another part of that is the shift from influencer, which is really someone who's very much like, you know, here's what I have to say, and here's why I'm super special, and you're not, and you just follow me. To integrator, which is like, I'm actually doing what it is that I'm telling you to do. Like we're actually the same, and people are all looking to follow those leading learners instead of the teaching teachers, right? When you look at your growth, and you mentioned that before you actually started teaching others, you already were, you know, you had businesses that you either had shares in, or that you were basically integrating and actually working with them on that as well. And obviously within even your Ask method, you know, the first thing you do when people come on board is to ask them questions. You're actually using your own assessments to find out what's the best assessment for them. What would you say would be kind of like the split now, and your interest in terms of the split of how much you're doing the teaching as opposed to how much you're actually applying this within the growth of your own businesses?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, you know, for me, there's a couple of things that I'll unpack in that. For me personally, you and I talked about this, I think, in one of the conversations that we had. I was a reluctant teacher for years because I had a phrase that someone shared with me early in my career where I was very impressionable. And they said, those who can't do, teach. And I didn't want to be labeled as someone who had no practical experience and who, you know, would be, oh, this guy is just teaching people how to make money, but he doesn't know how to make money himself, right? In this context. And so for years, I held back. I didn't teach. I literally went into 23 different markets, and every single one of those markets are markets that have nothing to do with teaching people how to make money. My first market was jewelry making, then orchid cares in the flower, then memory improvement. Then we went into golf instruction, tennis instruction, dog training, high-end water filtration systems, satellite television, business funding, the list goes on, right? It wasn't until I had a health crisis 7 years ago now. 7 years ago, I woke up one day and my wife said, honey, you're dad now. My first son was born 6 months old. She said, honey, you're dad now. If something were to ever happen to you, you need to make sure that we're taken care of. You need to apply for life insurance. And at that time I didn't have life insurance. So called life insurance companies up and, you know, found one. They send a person to your home, you do a medical exam, they draw blood, they do lab work, and so on and so forth. I go on a business trip, I come back, there's a letter waiting for me in the mail. My wife says, hey, I saw the life insurance information's come back. You know, open up that letter. Open up the letter. Later that day when I'm in my office by myself, and it was a 1-page letter, and it said, your life insurance application has been denied. Denied, what's going on? So I called the life insurance agent. I said, hey, I think there's been some mistake. I got a denied letter. And he said, it's not a mistake. I also have your lab results with me, and I think you want to sit down. And he told me to sit down. He read off a number of numbers. I didn't know what they meant. I wrote those numbers down, hung up the phone, and then I made the biggest mistake of my life. I went to Google to find out what they meant. And the results came back, kidney failure, renal system shutdown, pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
I just turned 30 years old. I have a 6-month-old baby at home, and I'm thinking to myself, crap, what the hell's going on? So later that night, my wife, she asked, I saw everything good with the life insurance, like all set. I said, honey, we need to talk. And she freaked out. She broke down. She said, well, I'm going to call the Ask a Nurse hotline. We're going to get a doctor's appointment first thing tomorrow morning. And we go to the doctor's first thing tomorrow morning. I hadn't seen a doctor in years. When I lived in Asia, lived in China, I hadn't seen a doctor. I hadn't seen a doctor when, I just hadn't done in years. Walked into the doctor's, explained to him what was going on. He said, well, let's order some lab results and just stick around. We'll order them stat, stay in the waiting room, and we'll rush the, process through, and we'll see what's going on. And I remember like it was yesterday. We're waiting in the waiting room. The doctor comes back out and he walks up to me slowly. He grabs me by the shoulders and he says, Mr. Levesque, you should be in a coma right now. We're rushing you to the emergency room. And rushed to the emergency room. And I'd found out I'd fallen into a state known as DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. My organs were shutting down. I was probably less than 24 hours away from slipping into a coma. And turns out that I had been living as an undiagnosed juvenile diabetic, and my organs were shutting down. I spent the next 10 days in intensive care in ICU. There was a dialysis patient next to me, a cancer patient down the hall, and me, 30 years old, baby at home. And it was that experience, Roger, that led me to say, all right, if I'm going to do something with my life, if I'm going to make a difference, now's the time. None of us are promised tomorrow. Like if I'm going to do something like, Levesque, get off your butt and you're going to do something. And I emerged from the hospital, type 1 diabetic. You can see I've got my insulin pump right here. I've got my continuous glucose monitor here. I've got my insulin drip into my abdomen right here. Basically an artificial pancreas emerged. My pancreas basically didn't work. The beta cells were all dead, doesn't produce any insulin. I had some serious kidney damage. And it led me to realize that, listen, if you've got something that you're going to do, now's the freaking time to do it. Like that thing that you've been saying someday, maybe I'll do this. And so that led me to say, you know what? I'm going to publish a book. I'm going to reveal exactly how I did it in all these markets. I've made all this money myself, but I really haven't changed the world in any way. Like I've done it in secret. No one knows who I am. I haven't, changed people's lives. And so put the book out there, sold hundreds of thousands of copies. We built a company, the Ask Method company. You just showed the post. Last 3 years, it's been ranked as one of the fastest growing companies in America, number 50 fastest growing education company in America. For me personally, despite being held back for years, my calling, I believe, is to teach. I believe that is my gift. That is my calling. That's where I feel like I'm operating at my highest purpose. And the very narrow thing that I've developed, I believe, world-class expertise in, and I would go toe to toe with anyone in the world on this very narrow topic, is what we're talking about right here, right now, today. And I've seen people who have transformed their lives using what we're teaching. So for example, I think about someone like Charlie Wallace. Charlie, musician, guitarist, wanted to build an online business. And he didn't know where to start. He followed the process that we're talking about right now. He went from quite literally a musician sleeping on a mattress on a floor to building a business in 18 months that now generates $2.2 million a year. He went on to be named one of Entrepreneur Magazine's top 10 entrepreneurs under the age of 30. He did it when he turned 29 years old. He bought his dad a mansion. He bought his dream car. His band now basically live with them, and they travel the world. Why did he do it? Because he wanted to make music with his band, and he didn't have a way to pay the bills. And that was his dream. That was the thing that drew him. So for me, I held off on teaching for so many years, to go back to the original question, because I was afraid of being labeled. And now for me today, I still use as a litmus test when seeking out a mentor, a coach, a teacher, is this someone who is practicing what they preach? Do they implement what they teach? Are they living their message in reality? And so for me, if I were to put a percentage on it, it tends to seesaw. It's a pendulum that swings back and forth. I'll spend a lot of time in implementation mode. Like for example, when we developed the quiz for this book that we've had a few 100,000 people go through over the last 6 months, I was spending a lot of time in the quote unquote lab developing this quiz, developing the frameworks, developing the 17 different outcomes, developing the questions, testing, optimizing, focusing on conversion rates, working through the Facebook ad campaigns, building out our one-click upsell flow. We sell a book and we sell a course on the back of the book. We sell something else on our membership, and really optimizing that whole piece. And then coming out of the cave and then teaching that to our students, teaching that to our clients, teaching that to our members, showing people what we did. Here's what we did over the last 6 months. These are the lessons that I've learned along the way.
Yeah.
And so I find now for me, it very much sort of seesaws like that, where I go into teaching mode. And then when that experiment is over, then it's diving into the next thing and the next quiz that we've got, working on in the background, and then kind of going back into the lab and working on that. So, for me, there are periods of time where for weeks it might be 100% or 90% teaching and 10% doing. And then there are weeks that the ratio is skewed in the opposite direction. 90% working on the next secret project that we've got on the horizon, and 10% out there sharing, what we're doing with the world. So that for me is what, how things have played out. And that's the path that led me to that mix of teacher and doer. Kind of what brought us here today.
That's an amazing story. I heard that story. That's incredible. I have yet to meet someone who is like fully driven and just giving themselves to the world, who doesn't have a story of some sort where there's that whole near death, or at least experience or mortality experience that shows up, right? Which is just awesome. And that is one of the biggest things. We have all this technology that's taking place, and it's that whole drive of those who are like, okay, how do I become a better version of myself? How do I find these things out about myself? And the drive is going higher, while on the one hand you have got all this crazy stuff like Cambridge Analytica and like Facebook's data, and it's like don't give your data to anyone, and then others, and then the other whole side is like, no, I want to give my data. I want to download my stuff onto my phone, so that basically when I go running and I exercise, then I'm actually going to do it more effectively, right? Or I want to be able to basically know more about myself, so I can actually save time by going for the right thing. I want to like take that whole thought process and the fact that all this technology is moving, and the fact that like one of the things that we're doing at the moment is doing a lot of stuff with chatbots, right? Because basically, obviously, chatbots are all about a chat, and if you're actually chatting about somebody with like questions, so we're now doing lots of questionnaires straight directly via chatbots. You've got Bucket.io, which is like clearly a lot more than just we're going to teach you how to do it. It's actually, here's a tool that actually allows you to be able to actually start tracking what you do. Could you share a bit about number one, like why you chose why you chose to actually set up Bucket.io and do it yourself, as opposed to just get someone else to get recommended, and then secondly, like just how you see technology, AI, all these things like leading into the whole process of what you're doing with the whole Ask Method.
Yeah, if we go back to 5 or so years ago when I started teaching this. So for years I was a practitioner only, doing this in market after market, and from there evolved into begin teaching people, simply because the conversations I was having with people was, how are you doing this? Like, can you like explain this? Can you teach me? Like, talk me through this. And it started with one-on-one conversations, and then snowballed from there. And when I started teaching, what I found is the thing that people consistently got stuck on was the technology piece. Right. In all the markets that I'd gone into, we had custom developed the quizzes and assessments with our in-house development team. And it simply wasn't an option that was accessible to most early stage entrepreneurs. The answer of, well, how do I get this set up? Well, just have your dev team build this out. I don't have a dev team. Okay. And what tool can I use off the shelf? Well, the landscape of tools available, the answer is there's nothing that did what you need to do. Of course, there are tools out there that you could, try to use, but it was always a square peg in a round hole, right? It's sort of like, I wish I had a visual to show it, but it's sort of like, people are coming to me and saying, I've got this box of screws, right? Like a screw, like you might use for a home project. I've got this box of screws. Which hammer do I use? And the answer is none of the hammers are going to work. Like, it doesn't matter what hammer you pick, right? And no one had developed the drill. And so I came across this technology that that was promising, which is the technology that underlies what's beneath the tool that's now come to be known as Bucket. It's very promising. And I started exploring it more and more. I started using it in some of my projects. One thing led to another. And I made the biggest investment of my life, and I basically bought the company. I bought the company, and that evolved into the technology today that's known as Bucket, which is the tool for building these quizzes and assessments in all these different markets. And so what I've learned is that the training, the methodology alone is not enough. The technology alone is not enough. The power is combining these two things.
Yeah.
When you're armed with the right methodology, the process for building out one of these assessments, and the technology to make it possible and practical, that's where the magic happens. And so for me, the choice was, this is where the entrepreneur in me really took a risk, made, like I said, the single biggest investment of my life. And it's proven, I mean, you know, who knows where things will lead, but that was 2.5 years ago. And it's proven to be a wise choice. And the reason why I say that is with the technology, it allows us to track the success of people implementing this methodology. Right. So we can empirically look at and see how many leads is someone generating? How is that growth happening over time? How is the acceleration of that growth playing out? And the correlation between that and, you know, and success elsewhere in the business. Yeah. You know, so for us, that's been a big part of what we've done. And for me, it's one of the most things I'm most excited about, is having that technology available so that anybody around the world can build one of these assessments.
That's awesome. And there's such a parallel between what you're doing there and what we're doing with GeniusU, which is like knowing there's no one else with the technology to do what we do, look personalized. And then in our case, because when someone's doing a different test, you're getting all that information on their profile. So if someone does the passion test, you now know their passions as well. And then someone does their talent. And the good thing about that is it means you can actually leverage on other tests they might have done before to say, right now I'm going to segment not just to someone that's answer my questionnaire, but the ones specifically that actually are passionate about education, right? Like I can just go straight to those people as well. And more, this whole thing about expectation of personalization is just what people are always looking for anyway. Final thing, just to share, because I know like there's a whole bunch of people that will be listening to this. They'll go, right, I like this, you know, I've been meaning to do this. I haven't done it. I'm going to go do it. Or, okay, I've got some new tools to actually think about doing this as well. I just want to address for a moment those who might just be starting.
Yeah.
The biggest issue or objection people would have is this all sounds great when I get a bit more fancy, but I just got to get my product up there. I just got to get this going. Yeah. One of the experiences that we have had is at this very, very first stage. I'm going to give one quick example here of something that's happening right now as of this week, because we've always got like, you know, stuff going on. And one of the things that's taking place at the moment is we have got within GeniusU, we've got an IPO happening next year. And so we basically, because we've got a lot of investors in our group, we basically went out to just all the people who were already committed clients of ours. And we said, hey, we're doing this $1 million investment thing, and you can kind of register, and it tells them a bit about what they do and how we do it. People can come for $1,000. But as soon as someone clicks on the register now, it takes them to this. You know, if I put my details in, then it does this. And investment amount, which one are you actually interested in? And this is actually in itself a quiz, right? It's like you're just saying which one it is. And the real key to this is the moment someone clicks on one and submits, it means that on the phone call that then happens, because it isn't all online, we actually do this with the call as well, becomes so much more focused and targeted, because now we know exactly what areas someone's looking at. And while this is for an actual revenue number or investment number, we've done the same every single time. We never do anything which doesn't have some way of segmenting something, even as simple as one little click down, because what that then does is it just means when we get on the call, we already have a lead into a conversation about something that someone's actually invested time to actually answer to, which already then means that our actual, close rate and conversion rate is like double what it would be otherwise, where someone's like, tell me more about yourself. So I just wanted to say that as one thing, is that this is not something to do later when you get more advanced. It's something to put in place like now, because it immediately saves you time and gets you more focused as well. I'd love you to just give your thoughts on that as well, for anyone who's just getting started and might be thinking, I'll wait for later, in terms of your experiences of people that get started right at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo exactly what you said, and I'm going to give, I think, a powerful reason. And if Roger, you're able to show your screen, or am I able to show my screen, or if I give you a URL, can you show your screen?
Yeah, I can do it either way. Yeah, download mode. There's a little share.
Why don't you just, it's an easy URL. If you just go to askmethod.com, and I'll show an example of this. And as you're pulling that up. So if you're just getting started, where do you begin? You begin with what we call a 1-question quiz. Now, if you just click on that yellow button, get the list building blueprint now, you'll see an example of this in action. It's going to take you to a simple page, and you'll see here, list building blueprint, free download, how to get your first 1,000 email subscribers and beyond. And if you click that green button, you're going to see it begins with what? A single question. Which of the following best describes you? Just getting started. I'm in the early stages of my business. I work with a small number of clients. I already sell to a large number of customers who want to scale, or I specifically help run marketing for others. Step 2, please enter your email address below. Now, this is a simple application of Bucket in action. Now, what this allows you to do is anytime someone comes into your database, is you're tagging them with that one data point. So I know more than just your email address. I know that you've selected whichever one of those you selected. And with that information, now you're tagged in my Infusionsoft account with the right, and you can pause it. I think a video is going to start. It's awful. Hey, you don't need to buy it. Well, you can if you want. Just, that was my secret ploy. Just go to this link, Roger, and just get your credit card out while you're there. No, but the point is, so with that information, you're going to get different emails, different offers, different follow-up messages based on that data point. Now, here's the thing. You might say, I'm not ready to do any of that. Like, I can barely have one email that I send out to everybody. Why should I do this now? Because here's the thing. When you start implementing any lead generating funnel like this, what's going to happen is this: 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, when you look back, you're going to say, you know what? I really wish I'd segmented my list from the beginning, because now that I have 5,000 names, 10,000 names, 100,000 names, and I'm putting them in all one big messy pile, dang, I really wish I'd asked that question from the very beginning. And that's where you are right now. Even if you're not prepared to do anything with the information, like literally nothing, like you're not going to take that information into account. Step 1, which of the following best describes you? Step 2, what's your email address? Even if you just do that and nothing more, and then 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever down the road, you then have the optionality to go back and say, you know what? I want to do a targeted campaign just to the super beginners in our case, right? Or in my orchid market. I want to do a targeted campaign just to the people who say they want to get their orchid to rebloom, or just the people who say they want to know how to repot their orchid, or just the people who say they've got yellow leaves on their orchid. Which bucket you want to target. So even if you're just getting started, as they say, the best time to plant a tree was when? 50 years ago. Second best time to plant a tree is right here, right now, today. So plant that tree today, even if you're not going to do anything with it. Use that segmentation, ask that question, and it gives you the ability to, number one, take a step in the right direction and learn this process. So that's what I'd recommend for someone who's just getting started. 1-question quiz, ask that one question, and get it going today.
That's fantastic. Very, very cool. That's so awesome. Well, Ryan, I'm super looking forward to what's coming up. So everyone stay tuned because we are going to, it's so important that we've always been telling people, hey, you should all have assessments, but then we haven't been telling them how to do it, right? So it's really awesome that we get to connect up and use all your expertise that you built up over time. I've dropped all the links in as well. So for everyone basically that wants to not wait and just jump right into all the things that Ryan's up to, do that before we kind of release what we're going to be doing together. And if I was to, and by the way, for everyone, just post whatever is your biggest learning that's come out of this as well. Post it down there, and then we'll be kind of sharing that too. And put your Q&A questions in so I can be answering them in the upcoming video. Ryan, what would be the last thing you would share with everyone? And it could be really on any area whatsoever, that for those who clearly are all on here because they're all looking to grow and make a difference in the world, build their business. Yeah, what would be your final words?
Yeah, for me, it's something I share with all of our students. It's something I've had to learn. I have it written on the bracelet that I have on my wrist right now, and it's this. Remember this. In everything we've talked about here today, you don't have to get it perfect. You just have to get it going. but the best time to get it going is right here, right now, today. So at the beginning of this call, we talked about the power of micro commitments. We talked about the power of taking one tiny step. Now, the key with a micro commitment is it needs to be so small that the step is literally impossible to fail. If the thing that you want to do in your life is start exercising, what's one step you can take that's so small, it's literally impossible to fail? Maybe it's to take one step in the direction of where your running shoes are. Maybe it's, if your thing is writing an email that you've been dreading, maybe it's just opening up your email client and typing one character on your keyboard. What is the step that's so small, it's literally impossible to fail? So the challenge that I'll put to anyone who's here on this call is, with what we've been talking about here today, building that assessment or quiz in your business. What is the micro commitment step that you can take right here, right now, today? It's so small that it's impossible for you to fail. And write that down. And that's it. Take that first impossible to fail step.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. This has been really awesome. And it's always great catching up, as always. And looking forward to what's coming up ahead. And best of luck with everything until we meet again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Roger. Looking forward to hanging out soon. And to everyone here on the call, thanks so much for being here. Super appreciate it. Looking forward to connecting soon.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. See you all later.